You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in BioHealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis, host of BioTalk. Doing something a little different today. We're at the 5th Annual BioHealth Capital Region Forum at AstraZeneca. And we're going to do some short podcast with some prominent people that are here at the forum. First person that I've been able to get off the floor is John Trainer, Vice President and one of the partnering heads at AstraZeneca. And one of our partners who has helped build the BioHealth Capital Region and this BioHealth Capital Forum to what it is today. John, welcome to BioTalk.
Hi, Rich. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. So what's your perception after 5 years now of what we've been trying to do in this region and the role that AstraZeneca has played in helping this happen?
I think the coolest thing about the forum, now that it's in its 5th year, is that it's morphed from a great series of panels and good sort of front-of-the-room discussions to just a great chance for a lot of people to get together. And if you remember, it was after last year when we first started to get the feedback that the panels were very interesting and everybody liked them, but they really needed more time to just talk to each other. And that's fantastic. And that sort of, I think, shows the growth we've had in the last 5 years from showing up where nobody really knew anybody to now building an actual community, and that's great.
I think we're beyond talking heads now.
Oh, okay. Exactly.
So basically, it's all about networking and connections. And, you know, that's something that we heard from all the participants in the past, but we built it into the agenda this year to take advantage
we really
of what
had to. About. It makes good sense. You mentioned AstraZeneca. You know, one of the things that we're love to be able to do is to help facilitate some of that. Like, we're thrilled to be able to host a conference like this and to be supportive of it and to get people talking to each other. You know, the interesting thing, and this is my own view, that most of us in this region don't really know how good this region is, right? Like, if you challenge people to name 10 companies, you know, they might struggle. But in reality, as you mentioned, there are 50 sponsors, there are new companies all over the place, you know, nearly $2 billion in venture capital flowing into, you know, so there's a lot going on, and just meeting all these other people increases the likelihood that we'll find other people who know what we're going through and can help us out, be it looking for talent, be it looking for scientific collaborators, be it looking for capital. I mean, that's how this works.
It certainly does. And if you listen to the theme that's evolving from a lot of the people on the panels, it may have a topic about how to commercialize. It might have a talk about manufacturing or about regulatory, but at the end of the day, it always comes down to capital. And what we've had is a great increase, but then we had a sobering discussion with Joel Marcus from Alexandria Real Estate talking about comparing us to San Francisco and to Boston with the types of capital that they bring into those regions every year. One of the things I heard from him, though, which should be good for all of us, is they're starting seed capital funds, and they want to bring one to Maryland. Wouldn't that be great for our region?
I think so. I mean, I don't think we need to be competing with Boston and San Francisco in the sense that they've got decades of infrastructure to do this kind of innovation, whereas we're coming at it more recently. So I don't worry about that. But I do think we need to keep working at getting more capital down here and getting more capitalists down here and have their money come with them. So yeah, Alexandria doing a seed fund is fantastic. And of course, the real estate that they do. You mentioned earlier that we only had 4% vacancy. Well, we need that to be a little bit higher in order for people to feel good about figuring out where to go.
We can't do a lot of spec for people that want to come into the region.
Well, that's exactly right.
They recognize that, and they're starting to do some spec buildings.
They absolutely are.
The reason for that is there's more confidence in the BioHealth Capital Region today than there was 10 years ago.
And the idea he mentioned of having a place to convene, we don't have one of those here, right? You know,
yeah,
imagine
we do. We're in it today.
Yeah, we're in it today.
AstraZeneca is the convening spot for the BioHealth Capital Region.
And that's great, but somewhere where you don't need a security badge to get in would be much better. So things like that around here, which he recognizes the need for, could just take this and make it even more of a community, and I think lead to more of the collaboration and sharing that I think makes a community.
The other thing he said is it takes 25 years to look at the evolution of a cluster. You know, this goes all the way back to Human Genome Sciences and MedImmune as the original bio companies within this region. The thing that I'm noticing, though, as I walk around this floor in this forum, how many people basically said, I worked in this building for X number of years, but they're now with another company within the region. And that's really what has made San Francisco and Boston successful as a cluster. People spin out, they create their new businesses, they go with new businesses, they attract other people to the region. And to be honest with you, MedImmune/AstraZeneca has been really the anchor in making that happen here.
I think so. And what you see in Boston and San Francisco as well, people going to multiple companies, people coming back into big companies as well. It sort of goes both ways as that happens. That's the goal. You know, I think 25 or 30 years we've had a biotech cluster here. We've had I think, some rougher times in the early part of the 2000s or something like that, and we're really sort of coming back from that. We are way ahead of a lot of these other places, and we have all the institutional advantages that we talked about. People say, oh, we're not Boston or we're not San Francisco. Well, who cares, right? We've got our own thing, and there's a lot to really recommend it, and it starts with this is a place we all want to be, and there's a lot of amazing science. We're going to have to work to make the rest of it really happen, and I think that's what we're doing.
So what's your vision for the next 5 years, John?
The vision for the next 5 years, I think we continue to have some great innovation engines. I mean, you need ideas, you need people, and you need money, I think, to really make these things go. And I think the number of companies that we have and new sources of technology and ideas from places we saw today like Hopkins, University of Maryland, Children's Hospital, we haven't even gotten over to Virginia and Inova and the University of Virginia and Virginia Tech coming up, and the amount of biocomputer tech that's now starting to happen with precision medicine that Virginia's in a good place to do. We need the people, and I think we're having an increasing number of entrepreneurs and scientists, and we invented the phrase earlier today about leaky vessels that are bringing more scientists in the region in our federal institutions. We need to keep pushing on the capital, but I have to say there's more capital here than I think people know, and the more opportunity there is, the more that sort of brings in, and we're going to keep working on it. Rich, I know you spearheaded, and we've got in place the Capital Summit coming up this fall, which is fantastic, but I think you just got to keep working it, and then perhaps, we have a building where we can all convene over on Rockville somewhere or something like that, and you really have a sense of community which kicks in.
Well, we basically said that the epicenter for the BioHealth Capital Region is actually the building that we're in today. It's actually where AstraZeneca and MedImmune is. If you really look at a circumference of maybe 50 miles from here, it's really the center. I understand what you're talking about, a meeting space. We're not like Cambridge where you walk across the street, you can go see whoever you want in the next coffee shop or the restaurant. But we have to work a little bit harder, but people appreciate it more when they accomplish something in this region that they have worked for, because the word I keep hearing today in the forum is persistence.
Yeah.
Persistence and patience. And it takes more persistence and patience in this region than it might in others, because someone's not going to just give you $25 million in your startup.
Yeah. And, you have, speaking of places to be, San Francisco and the Bay Area is not a bad model for this. You have the Mission Bay, you have the South San Francisco complexes, which are very big and dense complexes of biotechnology and biohealth. But you also have the East Bay, you also have further down in Mountain View and San Jose. And much like you have here, we have clearly a lot of activity happening in Baltimore, which is great. You have another amount of activity happening in D.C., in Northern Virginia, Frederick. And so you're right. As Joel Marcus was telling us, the epicenter of his real estate investments might be right here on I-270, and maybe even is here in Gaithersburg around the AstraZeneca and the old MedImmune complex. But it is spread out, and I think that can work. That can be fine.
And I think the term he used was subclusters.
Yeah,
those other
exactly.
areas that you're talking about, Richmond, Northern Virginia, Frederick, Baltimore, they're subclusters of the BioHealth Capital Region. We have to work a little bit harder to connect the subclusters, but that's beginning to happen after 5 years of convening people to connect.
I think it is, and we have to work together as an industry, which we do through BHI, we do through our local governments, we do through Maryland Tech Council, Virginia Bio, to help sort of push and make it easier for us to talk to. And that goes into places like the Greater Washington Partnership, and transportation investments, for instance, even come into play in something like this. It all sort of fits together.
I agree. And we're talking with John Trainer, Vice President and one of the partnering heads at AstraZeneca. John, thank you much for your hospitality for this 5th year. We look forward to another 5 years down the road and potentially more, and working
more
with
after
AstraZeneca.
That, right? Yeah, let's keep this going.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
We're at the 5th Annual BioForum, and we have another guest who is a regular participant, and that's Chris Frew, who is the CEO of Workforce Genetics and president of BioBuzz Media. Chris, welcome to BioTalk.
Thanks, Rich. Good to be here.
Everybody knows about BioBuzz, right?
They sure do.
Yeah, because they come monthly to get a free drink.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been doing it for 9 years now. The whole idea behind BioBuzz was to create a really open networking opportunity for people and do it regularly, consistently, so that people could start getting to know each other and building community.
And how does this complement your day job, which is Workforce Genetics and BioBuzz coming together?
Yeah, good question. So I first started BioBuzz when I was running another recruiting agency. And that's what Workforce Genetics is. It's a new breed of recruiting agencies. We're actually a hybrid recruiting and marketing agency. Because these days, I think a company's brand is really important in their hiring process. And a lot of that's because of you, Rich, because you're growing the region so much that companies are having harder and harder time attracting talent. And so it's more important these days than ever they can tell their story and really show who they are as a company. So Workforce Genetics does that. We come in and we help companies tell their story better. And then we also help them attract and recruit top talent.
And that's one of the things that we've been hearing at the BioForum from the panelists and the speakers, as well as the audience participation, is talent in a growing region and cluster like we have now is becoming a little more of a challenge when you have so many growing companies in similar spaces of maybe cell and gene therapy in the vaccines area, and they're already at a commercialization stage, not at the stage of trying to get to commercialization. So those skills, as your cluster matures, require different skill sets than when you're just trying to build your cluster.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're dead on. It's that commercial talent, the experienced commercial talent that have taken products to market and that have that baked in processes. Traditionally, in our region, you've had a couple key players that have a lot of that talent. But now when you have the rising tide and you have a lot of more companies that are seeing success in the clinic and commercializing, then yeah, it's going to put pressures on the companies that have that talent and the ones that are trying to recruit it.
Yeah, and then we have the new players entering the market. So you have Emergence and the AstraZenecas and the Supernus's and Macrogenics and GSK vaccines that are growing. But then you throw in there an Nautilus and a Kite and a Vigene and some of these new players. It's like robbing Peter to pay Paul.
It is. And there's a lot of talk about that right now, that if we're going to be successful, we can't just steal each other's people, right? We can't just have this people exchange. We have to really attract from out of the region, have a good story as a region, which I think is a lot of what today's about, and continue to help articulate that story and the brand. But there's a lot of concern about that, and a lot of companies are recruiting from out of the region. We just helped a company recruit someone from out of the region recently. But as the region does grow, that's going to be a little bit of the pain of the growing pains, is that if you're a company here, you're going to maybe lose somebody to some of those new players. I'm working with a couple of those new players you mentioned, and part of what we're doing is helping to tell their story because they're new. For them, it's people don't know us around here.
I think really also we have to learn to grow more of our own. And the academic institutions, whether it's Maryland, Johns Hopkins, Montgomery College, other institutions in Virginia, we have to understand what these future needs are going to be within this biohealth industry within this region, and also link more closely between academia and industry so that we can have the curriculum designed around what those future needs are.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was part of a panel last week, and that was a big part of that topic, is connecting academic and industry needs a lot better. And there's a lot that's actually happening, maybe not a lot that's actually turned into fruition yet. But Brett from the Department of Commerce announced a really interesting and strategic workforce program put together between Hood College and Kite Pharmaceuticals. And UMBC is doing some really interesting translational education programs right now. So I think it's happening, but it definitely needs
It'll take time.
It'll take time, yeah.
So now this is our 5th annual BioHealth Capital Region Forum. And you've probably had a chance to observe the evolution of this from 5 years ago. What do you see as the progress that's been made within the region, and what are some of the challenges that still remain?
Yeah, good question. I think part of the trend that I've noticed is that we're cashing the checks that we're writing. As an organizing committee, I would say you're cashing the checks as you're writing, you and AstraZeneca and the organizing parties.
And I don't know if I can understand that. To explain that a little more.
Yeah, sure. So the first meeting, we didn't have a brand, and you set goals at the end of the meeting. And then by the third meeting, we had a brand. And then I remember looking at that checklist of those first year's goals, and they were checked off. And I think that what's great is, I guess the point of that is we're seeing progress every year. And that's exciting. It's exciting to see that growth. One of those check boxes we talked about a couple years ago was another anchor tenant or another big anchor tenant. I don't know if we've seen like a giant big pharma come in, but you're seeing 100, 200, 300 person companies that are coming and relocating.
Yeah,
growing.
Kite.
I would call Kite
Nautilus is a nice one. And then Janssen's acquisition of Benavir brings Janssen into the region, which was never here before. So we're starting to see some global names come into the region. Even though they might not be 1,000 jobs, they have the ability to grow into something significant.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that in year 5, and I've been excited to watch the evolution, but it's progress every year. And I think something that the reason why this is growing, and you have 1,200 people this year and double that first year, is because people see progress. And anytime you see progress, people want to get behind it. And they say, this is something that's happening, and we want to help it happen. We're
talking with Chris Frew, CEO, Workforce Genetics, and the president of BioBuzz Media. And Chris, we want to thank you for coming on to BioTalk. We want you to keep the buzz going within the BioHealth Capital Region, and we'll see you at one of the next events.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rich. Good to be here.
We're at the BioHealth Capital Region Forum with a distinguished keynote speaker who has come down to the AstraZeneca facility today, and it's Alex Philippidis, Senior News Editor, Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology News. Alex, welcome to BioTalk.
Howdy, Rich. Thanks for having me.
We love having you here because generally the people within our region get to hear everybody within the region talking about what we're trying to do to progress this region to be a top 3 or top 1, as we hear from people in the audience, biohealth cluster within the United States. But it's rare that we have an external perspective of someone who is monitoring the progress in these other regions around the United States. And just from a background for the listeners, Alex, as the senior editor at Gen, does an annual top 10 rankings of the top 10 bioclusters in the United States. The latest one came out in September, and what he did was give us a retrospective of what's happening in those 10 regions around the U.S. and focused a little bit on the biohealth capital region, which is Maryland, D.C., and Virginia. Alex, give us a little perspective on your entry into genetic engineering news, how this whole biocluster ranking thing evolved, and sort of where is it today?
Okay. I've been at Gen and parent Mary Ann Liebert publishers since 2011. And in that time, Gen, I had been compiling lists, drawing on background. Before I joined Liebert and Gen, I had been editor of a weekly newsletter focused on biotech economic development around the country over at another company, Genome Web.
I still get that. That's still out today, right?
The newsletter itself died, but the work I had done in it always kind of interested me, this whole push by states, regions, and cities to try to draw in biotech and pharma businesses. So at Gen, I had begun compiling a list in 2014, trying to assess, what are the top 10 regions around the country? Because there have been several folks who are even bigger name biotech writers who've made...
They can't be bigger than you.
Well, only because I lost some weight. So.
Yeah.
So I tried my hand at it, looked for numbers that were objective and could be compared across regions. I figured on NIH funding, venture capital funding, that's always of interest, patents, because I think that's important, especially to the academic institutions, lab space, because as companies spin out of the institutions, they need a place to go and grow, as well as jobs.
And so basically those things are generally measurable with objective data, depending on your source, and they're updated on an annual basis, which gives you a baseline for your rankings that you're doing.
Yes.
Correct. So as we know, you basically started doing your rankings when we did our first BioHealth Capital Region Forum, which is around 2014-15. We're in our 5th year. You just did your 5th rankings in 2018. So it's interesting to note, as we've been tracking this region, which was not called the BioHealth Capital Region in the original rankings, which was probably suburban Maryland.
That's the designation that you'll see from commercial real estate companies, which have been the source stretching back.
And what we're trying to educate them to is that there's more to this region than just 270 and 3 miles along the 270 corridor, which you've embraced, and we appreciate that. At the end of the day, though, I think in your initial ranking, were in the 6 to 7 range. And last year in 2018, we were fortunate to have progressed to the number 4 biohealth cluster. And when we created this brand, Alex, we set a goal to be in the top 3 by 2023, which gives us 4 more years. But as you can see, being around this forum today, there's a lot of impatient people that don't want to wait 4 more years to increase our rankings. So tell me a little bit about the methodology, and also tell me what the trends are that you're seeing within the top 10 clusters.
Okay, sure. For the NIH funding, I use a publicly available database called Report. For venture capital, I use the publicly available PwC CB Insights Money Tree Report. That comes out every quarter. For patents, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has a database. It's available online, and you can use it to count the number of patents containing the word biotechnology awarded since 1976 in different cities or suburbs where companies are located. And the suburban counts, if anything, or one change over the years is to include more suburbs, because that's companies are moving out there, and it's a truer picture. Lab space, I use the total size of market market figures that JLL comes out with in their annual U.S. Life Sciences Outlook reports. Most recent one was last summer. And then for jobs, I do start with JLL's report, but I also look at the numbers from regional groups because sometimes they have a better grasp of their region. They might include a suburb or another area that might have been missed by any real estate company, not necessarily picking on JLL.
So, I mean, when you really talk about, you say, I look for the word biotechnology.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at our region, we branded it BioHealth. And the reason we've done that, which started back in 2011, was the convergence of what's going on within the healthcare, the biopharma industries, medical devices, health IT, EMRs. It's all converging and coming together now. So we're a pioneer in trying to rebrand. Sometimes it makes it difficult for people who are doing tracking to try to track biohealth categories versus biotech categories, which generally is what the standard's been within our industry, I guess.
think there's a transition, and I think in due time you will see that embrace because it's starting to happen where the biopharma industry is looking toward, whether it's precision medicine companies or diagnostics or artificial intelligence companies for different reasons, because they want to see how their meds are being taken at the health systems, especially the larger ones that embrace precision medicine. And it's an important factor that there are some sort of larger providers where they may do extra sequencing, extra research in the genetics. And the companies are looking at those types of relationships. You're seeing that in some regions, not all yet, but it's coming.
Everyone's becoming interdependent on one another with technology, science, and actually different companies. And also with the way technology's evolved, there's a lot of virtual that's happening. So you don't have to be physically present. But we also know that if you listen to some of our speakers today, having that proximity to be able to have that personal connectivity and that contact is also an important element in building a biohealth cluster.
For sure. And we're just sort of grasping that in early phases right now, because I think for a while, the focus certainly among most regions was, well, drugs. Let's pump out drugs or discover drugs through the university. And I think there's more to health than good drugs.
I agree with that. This is your first time to participate in our BioHealth Capital Region Forum, which is our fifth. We're just getting through almost the completion of the first day. Do you have any observations of what you've been able to gather from the speakers and just the buzz that you're feeling in this conference?
So folks were very friendly. I've had an opportunity to meet with many people. People came up. They obviously, in many cases, had a company to talk about or some initiative that they're working on. But I felt that the folks who came up certainly were not only positive about whatever it was they were trying to plug, but about the broader region as a whole. They see change, and that come out in some of the talks earlier today where people said, yeah, they're seeing progress, they're seeing activity. And whether it's companies coming in, like an Autolus, for example, and you mentioned that in your opener, or staying in the region, as with REGENXBIO, the gene therapy developer, that's one thing. At the same time, I think there's a recognition that there are some challenges that remain. A big one is trying to fill available jobs and match people with the skills, and across the board, not simply the scientists, but folks in managerial ranks and even in positions that, while we might at first glance think they're lower, are really kind of entry points to careers in the life sciences and ways for these companies to grow and develop talent.
Talent became a topic that was a major topic of discussion today, and it was really when you're attracting some of these new players in that are at later stage, you actually need different types of workforce skills because you're actually into the development side rather than just the research side. You're into the manufacturing cycle. And you really need to have more of those people who are further down the life cycle that you need to attract, because otherwise you keep trading back and forth from company to company. So we think that's a challenge within the cluster, but it's also a good sign to see that we need higher skilled and higher paying jobs within some of the regulatory, the manufacturing, and later stage development jobs.
For sure. And the presence of educational, larger scale institute, University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins, and many others, suggest, well, there are some potential partners to address some of these concerns. The community college system of Maryland and the education system is one that attracted me. There was traditionally, and I'm going back to about a decade ago when I was writing on this area, education was a substantial focus even back then. I think the challenge was trying to match what the schools do to what industry needed, and that's where the changes have come.
We just did that in a prior interview and talking about there has to be more interaction between industry and academia to make certain that the curriculum they're developing meets the needs of the industry within the backyards where they're going to be spinning out those graduates. So basically, this was your first time here. We want you to come back again.
Oh,
we've enjoyed having you
aren't
here.
You nice? Thank you.
And we are going to go listen right now to the next speaker, who is the head of oncology,
Jean-Charles Soria of AstraZeneca. Right there in your schedule,
which is extremely important because, as you know, AstraZeneca is the 800-pound gorilla within the BioHealth capital region, and they really have been the sponsor to help work with BioHealth Innovation and others to foster the growth of this cluster, because if you don't have industry engaged, you might as well forget it. So we've been speaking with Alex Philippidis, who is the senior news editor for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology News. Alex, thank you for coming down to Gaithersburg and the 5th Annual BioHealth Capital Region Forum, and we look forward to speaking with you again.
Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for having me in as part of the fun.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.